Good morning and welcome to all of you. Welcome to those who are gathered in the sanctuary and those of you watching remotely. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Alton. My name is Dee Evans and I am a congregant and a candidate for ministry. We are an intentional community whose shared work is to welcome all races, genders, and sexual orientations. We strive to welcome people of all creeds and all beliefs and all economic circumstances and every type of family. Our vision is to create a just world through a vibrant, beloved community. If you are visiting, a special welcome to you. There are many things you could be doing on this beautiful Sunday morning, and it is gorgeous, but you've chosen to be with us. I hope your time with us will be meaningful. If you are here in person, I hope you are experiencing a warm welcome. Please be sure to sign the guest book before you leave. If you are visiting online, we'd love to welcome you personally as well. Please let us know you're here by emailing firstuuchurchalton@outlook.com. firstuuchurchalton@outlook.com. We begin our worship today with a prelude by our accompanist, Joy Heft. was a lovely way to begin. A central ritual in Unitarian Universalism is lighting our chalice. It symbolizes that we have entered a sacred space and we are preparing our hearts for a blessing of a beloved community that happens whenever we gather. If you are watching elsewhere and have a chalice or a candle, please light it now as I invite you to join me as I light ours in the sanctuary. We're going to let Robin fix what I unfixed. Thank you. Please join me in saying the unison chalice lighting words projected on the screen. Well, she said. No? Oh, all right. We hallow this time together by kindling the lamp of our heritage. Now, to what is actually on the screen. Our opening words today are In Faith by Reverend Sunshine Jeremiah Wolf, taken from the Worship Web. This is a congregation that gathers in faith, not faith in one religion or one God or any one way. We gather in faith of the power of diversity, the power of love, and the hope of the world transformed by our care. We gather in faith in ourselves and in those around us, not a faith that requires perfection or rightness in one another, rather a faith that in our shared imperfection we may learn to stumble and fall together. Faith that we will help one another to rise and to try again and again. We are Unitarian Universalists. Please rise as you are willing and able for our first hymn, 1008. When I returned to this congregation from my internship, there was a section of the service on UU principles, and I thought that was almost magic to have that done because I love our principles. So today, I'm going to pick up that tradition and talk about the seventh principle. Now, the seventh principle is to affirm and promote the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. If you were to go to the UU bylaws, and I admit most of us don't go to those bylaws, but if you were to go on the web and put in UU bylaws, they would come up. And you would see in Article 2 that we as congregations covenant to affirm and to promote our 7 principles. And if you read down from that and go to another website that in essence explains the principles, you will find something that Reverend Barbara Wells Ten Howe explains. And this is important. The principles are not dogma or doctrine, but a guide for those of us who choose to join and participate in Unitarian Universalist religious communities. On the same website, Reverend Forrest Gilmore reflects on the 7th principles, on the 7th principle. He explains that it's a mistake to think of this principle as limited to the environment. It also points to the dangers of thinking individually rather than thinking in community. This principle lets us know the oneness of humanity and the oneness of humanity in all existence. And that is our beloved 7th principle, or at least some of it. For our meditation today, we are turning to the words of Reverend Kendall Gibbons, his reading, Communities of Memory and Promise, again from the Worship Web. Our communities of memory and promise are founded upon covenants because we all need a defense against the impulse of immediate feelings that challenge our best intentions. It is necessary to be reminded from time to time of what you said you were going to do and what you really want over and above the lure of the momentary comfort. Covenant is our word for the solemn promises that counteract the randomness of a future in which anything and everything is possible by committing us in advance to certain relationships and values. We do this because what we build with intention and even with difficulty is more satisfying in the long run than the pleasures we happen to encounter. We do it in time-consuming rituals, invoking powers that we scarcely know how to name, because we are seeking some way to give our lives the density and the dignity and the depth we suspect with longing might yet be possible. Remembering the words of Reverend Gibbons, let us use the rituals of joys and sorrows as a reminder of our oneness. We have stones, which are down there in front of the pulpit, and a bowl of water to represent how we bring our joys and sorrows together in one place. If you would like to participate in this ritual, please start on this aisle, go around and come up this aisle, and place a stone or stones representing your joys and sorrows in the water bowl. May we all hold a space of comfort and support ourselves with each other. So please do. Please remain seated for our second hymn. Several years ago, came into my head to be a UU minister. And one of the things that being a UU minister requires is for your congregation to tell UUA, well, she's basically, or they are basically okay. It's not much more paperwork than that. But you can't, yeah, we like her, as Robin just said. But you can't go forward without that. And because you all did that, I feel sort of a debt of appreciation to this congregation. So this morning, as a give back, if you will, I would like to share with you what I learned on my internship at Abraham Lincoln Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Springfield. Now, as I share this with you, please don't think I'm holding them up as some kind of paragon in virtue. I'm not. I'm just explaining what lessons I learned while I was there. Now, being an intern, you have to be there at least 10 months. And luckily, I got the entire 10 months completed. But I did not enter that internship in a good space. I was in a bad place personally. And perhaps that's why those lessons were so important to me. You see, I grew up in a working class background in Chicago. I don't want you to think it was ideal. It wasn't. There were bars on nearly every corner, and half our fathers were functioning alcoholics. However, growing up in that neighborhood, in that place, instilled in me a sense of values that I took into adulthood. And one of those values was community. And I'm going to illustrate that by talking about our shared gardens. Yes, it was Chicago. Yes, it was city, but we all had gardens. And people would grow things. Some people were good at growing one thing, some people at another. And while it was kind of a tradition to put more or less everything in your garden, you knew who was good and who was not good in certain areas. So what you simply did, if you knew your neighbor wasn't good in growing cucumbers, you'd bring your extra cucumbers to them. My mother was famous for growing garlic, so garlic was all over our Italian neighborhood. And that sharing symbolizes how we cared for each other. And if you didn't have a garden, things would mysteriously appear on your front porch. That simply was the way we took care of each other in that community. And if you did anything wrong as a child, your neighbor not only corrected you, your parent knew, and your parent backed the neighbor's correction of you. We took care of not just physical needs, but growing up and learning how to be a human being. That was my community. Now, there was another part to that community that probably when I say the word working class might be unexpected, and that is education. My community valued education. Very seldom did you hear of anyone going on a vacation. Rather, whatever extra money the family had went for tuition to send you to a Catholic school, not necessarily because you were Roman Catholic, but because of the fact that the public schools were so bad and everybody knew how important education was in our community. There was another value I got from my community, and that was what I'm going to call reading research, okay? All of us had library cards, and it was a ritual on Saturdays to walk the 4 blocks with your friends, go to the library, and pick up the books you read for the next week. That's just the way it was. Now, it wasn't just that you went to the library and read. Our folks expected us to do something with the education we were getting and our ability to read. And that was to understand why things happened and how they happened, so you knew your history and you learned about science. And if you did not know something, you were not allowed to be ignorant. You were told, get your, and I won't use the word, so I'll say posterior, to the library and read about it. You were expected to look things up. They didn't call it research. They just said, get to the library and read. Learn how things work. Now, that was a really, really good skill. And let me tell you why. When we reached adolescence, when I was young, nobody talked about sex. It was a forbidden topic. But because we knew how to research things in the library, we made our way to the adult section, found the books on sex, and educated ourselves. And maybe that's why that value of looking things up and knowing the science of things remains so important to me. So those are the values I carried forward. Now think about being a Unitarian Universalist. We value reading, we value understanding, we value discussing things, we value looking at why. We value truth, which is why we don't say there is one truth, there's a possibility over here that something else could also be true. So as an adult, this seemed to be a great faith for me. Until the pandemic hit. I wasn't upset that there was a pandemic, at least not at first. I lived through the polio pandemic. I knew what that meant. But in my wildest imagination, I would have never thought people would say, I'm not wearing a mask. It's my right to infect you. I never thought that people would reject vaccines. When I was a child and the polio vaccine came out, that tells you how old I am, we trekked to the bus stop, took the bus to the public health department, stood in long lines, and got our vaccines. And we did that not once, but 3 times. And no one complained. We would all say, oh, let's all go to the public health department today, because we mostly were given postcards. They sent you postcards the times you could appear. And it was kind of like a neighborhood thing. So when people refused vaccines, I was appalled. I had seen people die of measles. A mother, I was told, lost her baby because of measles. I don't understand the relationship. I had a classmate who became paralyzed because of polio. But when we went and got those vaccines, we knew something that was important. They didn't just protect us, they protected the other people in our community. We didn't want to make anyone else ill. And then in 2019 and 2020, I learned about a different kind of world, a world I did not understand. And worse, it led to violence that I didn't think ordinary people engaged in. I had worked with people who were violent, but they had a reason in the sense that their mental illness and their voices led to violence. Now, that's very rare among the mentally ill, but I worked with that very rare population. It wasn't that I didn't think there was violence. It was just that I didn't think my neighbor would go and hit somebody because they told him to wear a mask. I got to the point, because my brother works for an airline, where I was kind of afraid for his safety until I found out they put huge sheets of plexiglass up as people got tickets and got on the airplanes. But that didn't save the flight attendants. One person who works for the same airline that my brother does had her head smashed into the side of the airplane and had a severe concussion. That was her world. And then, because her world was like that, I started questioning my UU faith. What do you mean everyone has inherent worth and dignity? You want me to think that the person who doesn't wear the mask has inherent worth and dignity? You want me to believe that we are a interdependent web of existence when somebody doesn't care if somebody else dies? It was with this crisis of faith that I entered my internship. Now, I admit that was not a good way to enter an internship. But in my defense, there were two things. One is I got a therapist, and the second thing was I had worked so many years as a psychologist, I knew how to put private life here and work over here and not to mesh them. So I took on my internship. And I also knew that I had a supervisor in Reverend Martin Wolf. So I start my internship. The congregation had just opened the building, and I started, and I'm getting a little bit excited. Was I worried about walking into a congregation of people? Yeah, but the virus had gone down, and we did fine. Then all of a sudden, like a tsunami, COVID rises to dangerous levels in Springfield. And the congregation has to make the decision to close their doors. Now I get all worried. I got a learning contract. How am I going to fulfill this learning contract during this internship with the door shut? So as I'm saying that to Reverend Wolf, he said, don't worry about it. It won't be a problem. And I'm thinking in my mind, oh my God, oh yes, it will. And then he says, I have a favor to ask you, Dean. You know, our name is Abraham Lincoln Unitarian Universalist Congregation. We're not a church, we're a congregation. And that's an important distinction because a church is essentially a building where Christians gather. And our congregation is diverse. We have people who come from the Jewish heritage and Muslim heritage, and church can be an offensive word to them. So please call us a congregation. Well, of course, I'm an intern. I'm going to do that. But there was something else I knew about Reverend Wolf. He is a master of language. If he defines something, I have never found him to be wrong. Right? So I go home and I do what every highly educated person will do when they don't know something. I Googled it. And up come not theological treatises, but definitions from Merriam-Webster Dictionary. And lo and behold, Reverend Wolf was correct. And I realized that even though we had a lot of Unitarian Universalist churches called churches, it was because they started from a Christian heritage, and we have expanded beyond that. So I became very careful to use the word congregation. A congregation is a group of people that meets together, usually for a purpose. A group of people that meets together, usually for a purpose. Now, none of this allayed my fears that I would not be able to meet my learning objectives. And I went home that night, and I literally was sleepless all night. Oh my God, I put 3 years in already, and blah, 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 all this going on in my head. Didn't sleep all night. And Reverend Martin had told me, just stay home in your apartment until, I text you or call you or something to let you know what we're doing. So I go through another whole day, oh my gosh, worrying. And then I wake up the next day, I trot to my computer, I open my email, and my mailbox is filled. And it's filled from people from the congregation. And I start opening the emails, and it's like from what we call a worship team, they have a different name for, this is how we're going to do worship services. And the tech team says, this is how we're going to video these services. And then the choir has, this is how we're going to sing. And then it goes through the emails. This is when social justice is meeting. This is when racial justice is meeting. This is where our covenant group is meeting. And I'm going, what in the world? The doors are shut, and nothing about this congregation stops, because they come together for a purpose: to be Unitarian Universalists. That was the beginning of a slight movement away from the very dark place I was in. And then something else happened. Abraham Lincoln does not do social justice by themselves. They have a number of partners they engage with. And that keeps you from being burnt out. That's one of the reasons. So, Reverend Martin, when I started my internship, said, well, you can do, Sierra Club, you can do Parenthood, wherever the UUs from that congregation had partnered with. And I said, oh, Faith Coalition. So I, of course, I had an interview with them. They accepted me as a volunteer. And I get on the website, I look up, and there are people from Abraham Lincoln congregation. To continue the work of the congregation, closed doors were not an excuse. They continued social justice work, and as I learned more from them, I learned that other committees, UUs were there from other committees too. A congregation meets for a purpose. If you have not read this book, Widening the Circle of Concern, it's a report of the UUA Commission on Institutional Change. Came out in 2020. And as you can see from all my tabs, I considered it a very important report. And in an area on social justice, they talk about bringing social justice beyond walls and into the community. The congregation brings our UU values into the world. And I began to think completely differently about being a UU. Didn't depend on walls. To be part of a UU community, what I had to do was have the intention to meet together, which is what was in our reading. So I'm becoming a little bit brighter in my outlook on life. But remember, I told you that the church closed down. Well, it opened up again. The church building, let me be precise in my language, the building of the congregation closed down. See, I still have trouble with my language. And then we opened again as COVID went down. And there were regulations like we have, wear a mask, blah, blah, blah. And there was a protest by a couple of people. And they took it very seriously. Now, I, as an intern, am attending board meetings, and I walked into the board, no, I didn't want to go to the board meeting. And I even said to Reverend Martin, I really don't know if I need to be at this board meeting. I don't have any say. Yes, you need to be at the board meeting. So I walk into the board meeting with apprehension. because I don't want to hear all the strife and the emotions and the arguments. And I've been to a lot of board meetings. I knew what happened. Robin's shaking her head, yes. But when I walked in, I got a shock. People had computers that normally didn't bring them. Even the people on Zoom, I could see there were papers, because it was a hybrid meeting. I could see there were papers on their desks. And there were papers all over the desks of the board members. What in the world? And as the meeting went on, I realized somebody had brought on the topic every UUA policy that existed. Somebody else had brought the American with Disabilities Act in on their computer and printed out the relevant parts. Somebody else had brought in the CDC current regulations. Somebody else had brought in the Illinois Department of Health regulations. And I saw something that let me know, despite what the news said, despite anything, there were still people who read and who did research. And I saw a discussion. Yes, it had some emotion on, but it was so filled with concern for their community. And after 2 hours of this discussion, the president put her hands down on the table, lowered her head, and said, "We are a faith community. We must do what is good for everyone." Now, they say when you're in depression, this is research I read when I was a psychologist, you start seeing grays. You literally lose the depth of color as you get depressed. I don't understand the biology of it. But it was, and I did not really realize I was depressed over the state of the world, but I was. But as the president said that, suddenly it was like a light went on in the room. I started seeing colors in depth. We are a community of faith. And what is our faith? We use those principles to guide us how we behave with each other and in the world. And despite the state of the world at that time, there were still people who cared, who were good. Good, by good I mean caring for each other. I remember being, and I think it was in St. Louis, and Susan Frederick Gray was speaking. And at the time, Susan Frederick Gray said, "We have 100,000 UUs and 100,000 people can change the world." And I remember thinking, is that woman in touch with reality? There's billions of people. The world's a mess. That was before the pandemic. But when I sat in that room and I saw that group of people so committed to being Unitarian Universalist and a people of faith, I knew that I was the one, not Susan Frederick Gray, out of touch with the world, with reality. 100,000 people can change the world. Now, I finished my internship. And what I learned is being a congregation is not dependent on walls. It's not dependent on how we meet, but that we meet. I'm going to be honest. I voted for us to move, but I walked away with some anxiety over, we've been together, not we, but the congregation has been together for 185 years. Are we going to survive this upheaval? Then I remembered when our minister, Reverend Krista Taves, gave the history she talked about. In our early years, we didn't have a church building. We didn't have any building. People moved around meeting in homes. And that congregation, our ancestry, survived. I'm not worried anymore. I'm not saying it's not going to be tough. But you know what? We are UUs, and we are a congregation, and we will survive together. Please rise as you are able and sing our final hymn, 1058, Be Ours a Religion. As we approach our time for our offering, give what you will. I invite you to give today when our usher will collect our offering, or give by mail, or by using the Giveify app. Doing so will help us meet our financial responsibility to you by the end of the year. This offering will be most sincerely and gratefully received. May it be lovingly given. Please join me in our offering prayer, which is projected above. May this offering equip us to inspire love and to seek justice. We have some announcements. I'm going to let Robin go first, and then I will read the ones from Mary Johnson.
Paula, do you want to talk just quickly about Fourth Saturday? Okay, sure, no problem.
I know you don't know.
I have a big mouth. I know, you can say that.
So we had our fourth Saturday distribution yesterday, and we had quite a few people. We had 37 people come to represent a total of 74 people in their households. Melanie and Laura helped with the distribution, and We thought of some new ideas for fourth Saturday, and so we'll have a meeting next month. I'm not sure what date yet because I have to take a look at the calendar for next month. But just to kind of bring some more people in, especially in light of Dee's message today, helping out whatever ways we can is such a part of our UU principles. And we'll also be having a coat drive. So just kind of planting that seed for now. Thank you.
I know that Mary sent out a message about the listening circle. You should have gotten that in your realm email, so that the next listening circle, a place to just process what's going on with our transition that Dee just spoke of. October 4th at 7 o'clock. It's on Zoom. You should check your emails. If you haven't gotten it, then you can ask Mary to resend it and we'll figure it out. It'll be in the newsletter, or it's announced up here. Dee had. Oh, okay. Sorry. That's okay. Good. All right. Sorry. Sorry about that. Peg was here just, she's trying to set up some things out there, but on October 1st, she needs 2 more volunteers to help with Unity Fest. I cannot be here, but if anybody can make it to help her sit at a booth, talk about UU, answer questions, or just kind of hang out and meet people. The goal of that event is exactly that, unity, being in community together, and just nothing's to be sold, nothing to be done other than enjoy each other's company. So if you can volunteer, you can speak to Peg about the 2 time slots. She needs 2 other people, 1 for each time slot. I will be out of the country for our next, I know I'm excited, can you tell? Our next potluck is going to be this Sunday when Reverend Krista is here on 10/16. We have tons of hot dogs and hamburgers left in the freezer. So hopefully somebody will try to get them out and defrosting in the refrigerator before then. But please bring things. We've got burgers and hot dogs and veggie things. But please bring things on the 16th so to have potluck that night. And then lastly, Mary Weber and I will be in conversation about having a new member game night sometime in November to have some fun, to meet people, to bring some games, just kind of hang out and have a blast together. So that's the goal. Anyway, thank you. Thank you, Dee.
I won't repeat the whole thing about the congregational caring team holding our first listening meeting, except to say October 3rd at 7 p.m., either here or on Zoom. It's a hybrid meeting. If you have something you want included in the October church newsletter, please get that information to Mary Johnson by this coming Tuesday, September 27th. And lastly, I thought Peg's booth, Unity booth in Edwardsville was yesterday. So I appeared and had to find my way to the park through a phone call because the directions on Google weren't correct. But I want to tell you it's a lovely setting. So if for no other reason than to be out on a lovely day in a lovely place, please volunteer. Now, after the announcements, it is time to extinguish our chalice. Please help me by joining in saying the words on the wall. Our closing words today were written by Reverend Carley. Reverend Carley was my first UU minister many years ago. Cheered by our community, blessed by our covenant, uplifted in mind and renewed in spirit, go forth with courage and in peace to meet the days to come. Amen. Let us close our service with a postlude played by our accompanist. Have a good day.